we all had meetings that started at about noon. He said, well, I'll make it work.
I think we can actually do it before if we have.
Karen, let me know when you're ready.
But we always have to have a design.
All right.
I think David is, Lourdes.
Calling the, what is it, December 7th, meeting of the Design Review Boards to order. And ooh, my spectacles are falling apart. Deal with that later. The minutes will be brought for approval next month. So that brings us to announcements. Staff, Tim, do you have anything for us today?
Yeah, good evening. Typically, under the announcements, we announce any continuances or anything of that sort. Number one, the Walmart liquor box expansion. The applicant is asking to table this item.
Is that the precise motion we will need to take? Because my
Yes.
understanding of tabling something is at the end of the meeting, it
Right, so I
Well,
believe
the applicant can bring it back. Basically, it just puts everything on hold, and it's up to the applicant. If they never come back, then
but they would have to reapply and go back through the process once it's been tabled.
okay, all right, that's the
advertising.
effect of
Mhm.
tabling something, good, okay, excellent. Okay, anything else, Tim? Do we have another, there's another one on
Number
the...
3, Grand
Okay.
Boulevard South deviation. They're requesting to be continued to next month's meeting, January 4th.
All right. Okay, any other
No.
meeting shortening items?
Are you excited?
Those are the only ones.
Yes,
All right.
yeah, so we'll have a motion for both of those items.
Okay, okay, in that case, we'll get right to the items to be heard. Item number 1 is the
Oh,
Walmart...
no, I guess
I'm
if
sorry.
we could have motions on number 1 and number 3 to
Oh,
continue them.
yeah, no, well, okay, okay. In that case, the chair will entertain the request to table item number 1.
So moved.
Second.
Any further comments from staff? Any comments from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay, should we dispose of number 3 as well? Okay.
That'll be easier.
Okay, item number 3, Grand Boulevard South deviation. Do you need to do anything, Lee?
That's what I'm about to ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
I am definitely doing that when we actually hear it. Do I need to recuse from?
For the continuance is not necessary,
Okay.
but in January, we'll have to do that.
Okay, with that disposed of, I'll entertain a motion to continue to the January 4th, 18th meeting.
Make a motion to continue.
Second.
Okay, probably moved and seconded. Do we have any other comments from staff? Any comments from the audience? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously.
Any comments from the audience? Either of you?
Okay, that brings us to item number 2, the shops at Inlet Beach.
Yes, this is just the lighting portion. This came before you last month. You approved the project except for the lighting. You continued that to this meeting. The applicant is not here, but he did turn in the lighting information. You'll just have to decide if that's sufficient or not.
My observation is that, or my recollection is that we pulled out the lighting because it looked like it was inappropriate for the development. It appears that the stuff they have submitted matches the previous phase of the development, just based on my recollection. So,
I don't think that was their intent.
yes. So, anybody else have any questions or comments of staff?
Are the X's on the location map where these are? I guess they're,
Yeah, sort of an X with a little point. I think that indicates which way the light fixture is turned.
Oh.
these are the. You know.
Weren't they
That
reducing
would be
the
way too
height
many.
of these?
Yes, I think I previously estimated that the lights look like, I think they were noted as 25 feet tall. These are 16 feet to the mounting height from the ground, which again, I think is
That's
consistent
much
with
better.
what is much, much better, and I think it's consistent with what's in the previous phase of the development. Okay, well, do we have a motion of some sort?
Motion to approve.
Okay, it's properly motioned and seconded. Any comments from staff?
No.
The board? From the audience? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. All right, that brings us to item number 4, Premier Property Group sign deviation. And as we've done in past meetings, item number 5 is also a Premier Property Group sign deviation. So Tim, if you could present
Yes,
both items.
It's the same sign, two different deviations. After the last meeting, when we had 3 deviations on one application, we were instructed that each deviation requires a separate application. So that's why you get 2 different project numbers, 2 different agenda items here, but it's actually one sign. This is in Seascape Town Center. It's between Thrills and Acme Oyster House. I wasn't sure if they had multiple bays when I did the staff report, but they do. They take up 4 bays there in this building. So they're asking, the first one is a deviation to square footage from the code required, and their master signage plan required 54 square feet to 72 square feet. They also have a handout they wanted us to hand out.
Tim, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Real quick. On page 2 of 11, on the first,
What is that? Is that a one big thing?
yeah,
different
pre-application notes,
Mm-hmm.
what does that
Is it all
actually
the same?
say?
You go.
The second line.
Oh, it is?
I know we'll go in December.
Deviation of length. Initially, it was like 28 feet long.
They're all the same.
No, we'll go in December.
Oh, meeting. That it says we'll go in December.
Oh.
They wanted to make sure they were making this meeting when they turned in the application.
Okay.
But initially, they needed a deviation for length because the code does control length, but they reduced it so they didn't need that deviation. So they're not applying for that. This is just showing how big the facade is, how much area those bays take. And I mean, they can elaborate when they come up, but they wanted us to hand this out to you. So I will entertain any questions you may have.
What is the same thing we talked about?
Okay, so Tim, sorry to belabor this. but just
And we
looking over-
have, just so everyone's on the same page, Thrills were granted deviations, and Acme Oyster House was granted deviations, just so we all know
Okay.
this is in between the two.
Is this the same size as the Thrills sign?
It's smaller.
Smaller?
The overall square footage is smaller, but it's the same height.
1/3?
Thrills was approved to be 48 inches tall. That's actually the next deviation, but they're asking for 48 square feet. So from that point of view, it's the same height, but this one's actually not as large as
Right.
Thrills.
Good.
Okay, well, unless anyone has any other questions of staff, I'll invite the applicant up to make their presentation. If you could identify yourself for the record, please.
Mr. Bailey, I'm Ron Colbert, Dynamic Products Agent for Premier Property Group. This is Grady Elder, the broker for the agency.
And I guess before
we're-
we go forward, I was going to make just one quick announcement, just so it's clear for the record. So for a deviation to be approved by this board, there'd have to be a vote of 4 members. As you can see, we only have 5 here tonight. We're short 2. So I just want to make that clear to you to see
Yes,
if
ma'am.
you wanted to go forward tonight with the 5 members that we have.
Okay, in our opinion, we think we're asking for a slight deviation considering the development that we're within. We're 350 feet off the Highway 98. We're next to Thrills. We're next to Acme Oyster Bar. We're only asking for, our largest letter is 24 inches. And if you look at our logo, which we have used for 10 years, the and the property group are only 9 inches, 9.5 inches. And one of the reasons we have to do that, and I'm the sign manufacturer, is we cannot fit LEDs within a channel letter that is less than 9 inches tall and 1.5 inches wide. We can't fit the lighting in there. So that is the minimum size we can have the sign lighted. And that's what has driven this. We don't want a big sign. We don't want a sign as big as Thrills. We just, want a sign that can be seen from Highway 98.
Yeah. I mean, I would just reiterate what he said. That's our logo, and it's kind of a unique logo, and we've had it for 10 years. The way it fits on the building, and we do have a very large fascia and a very large 5,000 square feet. So in order to get it proportionate, I think, to the building, to the surrounding signs, and to be able to, it's very important for us as a sign company going in there to be visible as much as we can from Highway 98. So that's why we're asking for the slight, deviation. So.
May I ask a question?
Certainly, yes, go ahead.
I noticed you just held something up and it had the logo itself at the top, but you are proposing that it moves over to
Yes,
the side
yes,
as shown
yeah.
in the drawings that we have.
Correct.
They have a vertical and a horizontal logo. And we moved that over to the side to achieve as best we could to fit it within that
I got the one
space.
y'all have right there, but it does show it this side. So, sorry.
So you guys would like to go forward tonight with your request? So you would like to go forward tonight with your request?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I can't.
Go
I can
forward
only
with our
stand up so far.
request.
Yes, we would, yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're worse than me about it.
I am. I
No,
can't see, I
it's
can't
okay.
hear.
I just couldn't get close enough.
Speaking to the microphone.
All right, I'm trying.
I'm sorry.
Got a little extra there in
Sydney
the
laughed
way.
first, let the record reflect.
No, no. Oh, that's great.
Okay, any other questions of the applicant?
We have 2,010 square feet of fascia area, and we're applying for 72 square feet of sign, which occupies 3.5% of that fascia area. If we were to reduce this to the code, Premier would only be 18 inches and the in property would only be 7 inches, and we could not light those letters. So we would have Premier lighted and we'd have the in property group not lighted. It wouldn't look right.
Looks fine to me.
I'm gonna say that a precedent kind of has already been set, with,
Not really.
with the other applicants that became here, already, and granted deviations. That's my thought on it anyways.
Technically, it says in the code, we don't set a precedent when we approve a deviation. I mean, if that's your feeling. Was there any consideration given to just dropping the, it's hard, in the title and bringing that logo down and getting it within the 36 inches?
Well, that's our logo. That's our company name. You're leaving out part of our. I know it's just the word "the," but that's every sign that we've ever done. We have 4 offices or 3 offices now, and that I guess we thought since this fascia was by far the largest fascia we've got anywhere, that it wouldn't be an issue. I mean, I don't. In answer to your question, no, we didn't think about it just simply because that's our logo and that's our name. We've got it switched down as little as we can possibly get it to where we can light it, and so that's why we're before you today, because we just got it as small as we could, and we're still not quite within the boundaries of what you'll require.
My observation is, and I realize there are no precedents set by whatever decisions have been made on deviations by this board previously. But when I doesn't have a lot of mass, and I would suggest similarly, the D doesn't have a lot of mass either. And I don't have any problems with that. I'm always pretty adamant about staying within the letters that are allowed by the code, which is 36 inches tall, and 24 inches, or 36 inches tall for the total, and 24 inches for the signs, letters, individual letters, and, I don't have a problem with this.
Is lighting required by the development or the shopping center?
The Seascape Resort would prefer that they have consistency, halo, backlit, reverse channel letters, consistent as every one in there except Acme, which y'all allowed to have exposed neon, which,
No. That was dictated by the master signage plan. That was not a deviation request to us, if I remember correctly.
okay.
And I'm trying to remember, there was some confusion about the deviations for Acme.
There were, and
And
I'd honestly have to go back and
I
look
don't
at-
think that the building sign we approved a deviation for, and/or if we did, went back to find out that it was allowed in their signage plan. So I think we should be careful saying we approved a deviation for either, the signs on either side of this one. I just like.
The projecting sign on the east side got a deviation for height because it's this
Because it
way.
was-
Because if it was
Yes.
this way, it would have been into code. But it was this
Correct.
way because as it turned out, we ended up allowing the canopy signs under the master signage plan.
That's right.
And the sign in the front is less than 54. They didn't even go to the max of 54
Correct.
for whatever reason. But the sign on the corner did get a deviation for height, not for size, but for height.
And did we not find that in their master signage plan, they allowed for blade signs, which is what that sign?
Yes, I wrote that master signage plan.
So actually, we did not approve a deviation for that. That was not a
Yes,
deviation.
for the height.
Because,
We did. You did.
but my understanding was since they allowed blade signs, if you had a blade sign within our height, that would be, anyway.
Still, the height is 36 inches. That's all the code allows.
Yeah,
Anything-
but comparing it to this situation,
I wasn't comparing. I just said each have gotten a
Yeah.
deviation. I wasn't
Yeah.
trying to make a comparison one way or the other.
no, I'd say you were. It was
Well,
stated
and
earlier, though.
I guess just for clarity's sake, not all of the deviations requested on Acme were granted by this board. I think that's
Correct.
Ms. Moore's point. I'm sorry.
I think one
So
of
not
six.
all of the deviations that were requested by Acme Oyster House
How
were
many were
granted.
granted?
Sir, I don't know. It was, I'd have to go back
It was
and look.
one or two of
I
six that
don't-
ended
I'm
up
not sure.
not being in the signage plan, if I remember.
Well, can I say this? We kind of like to stand on our own as far as our sign. I mean, we're real proud of our logo.
That's what I suggest.
And we're trying to get as close to what, as we can. I do think, I've been doing this a while too, and I actually owned a sign company in a previous life. So being this far off the road, and just trying to get, the visibility that we can. And I'm certainly saying there's no precedent set or anything else, but we're as small as we can get and light it, the way that it's gonna look good, it's aesthetically good on the building and with the other signs. So that's pretty much what we're asking for, so.
Well, it sounds like you've taken everything into consideration, and I like the idea that you're going as small as you can to light the D and make everything proportioned. I like it.
Thank you.
Okay, I think everybody said their piece. Do we have anybody willing to make a motion?
Can I just make one last comment?
Certainly, absolutely.
So I look at these things, and I do understand the points about the things that are causing it to be taller than it's allowed to be are kind of minor things. But we had somewhat of a similar situation on the Thrill sign. And if you remember, and you weren't here when that sign deviation got approved, but after that went in, we had all publicly stated in past meetings that we very much regretted approving that deviation because on the building and possibly the renderings that we were shown might have not have been to scale, it looks very, very different and much bigger, because I think signs in their totality are what strike us when we're, and if you want an example, and I can give this example, I think, because it's not in Walton County. It's in Okaloosa County, but the city market down in Okaloosa County on the, they just built an addition on the south side, on the north side, but it's on the south side, the older one. That is a great example of a building that had wonderful, wonderful architecture. But when you drive by, there are big signs on every tenant, and it just takes away from the architecture of the building. I'm not comparing this building to that. I'm saying that's an example of the concept on the ground. So I think we run the risk, as this continues to develop out, that we're going to end up with, clearly everybody, almost every tenant in there is coming to us for a deviation. And I think we've determined that there's, even with the tiny Acme signs, they're very visible from 98. So, which is what got this whole thing started back when the first sign deviation was requested, was the visibility from this far back from 98. So that's my concern, my thoughts about it. Even though those elements seem small, I think when it gets on the building and people see it, it'll have an impact, I guess is my point.
I think, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I think that Acme changed their sign and replaced that smaller one up there with a larger one. I believe they did, yeah. So it's more in tune
It's still
with,
not at the
it's
max.
still within the-
yes,
right.
It is a bigger sign, yes, they switched it out.
right. But it's in tune, more in tune with, because it looked a little naked there, being real small initially.
And I
Yeah,
think-
because they didn't want to spread it out, but they
Right.
ended up spreading it out.
Right.
And it made it look more in proportion with the building.
Mm-hmm.
But that was their
All the
choice
signs
not
are
to.
already up except one on in that whole center right there right now. There's one building left.
And if I'm not mistaken, how much square footage is left in that? You're the last one in that
We're the
building,
last, we're the
correct?
last,
In that side of it.
correct. Yeah, the village door is on the end, and they're the only person that does not have up a sign in that whole center that we have left.
And I'll also say this, something else I think we have to keep in mind is that, yes, that is the case today, but these decisions can last for a long, long time. And one of these multi-bin tenants could go out of business, and then we could end up back here with 6 or 4, not here, but we could end up with 6 or 4 tenants in there. So while today there might not be that many signs, so it seems okay to have a bigger sign, in a couple of years, it could be a completely different scenario. So I'm
We have an 8-year lease, and it's costing us a lot of money, so we're not going to be going anywhere. So-
I think there are others that might have a bigger chance of that happening than you, quite honestly.
The photo that we're looking at with you said there's 4 bays that you all have. So do you have a bay on either side of the
Tower.
tower that we're looking at? Okay, okay.
That's I think the hatched.
Okay, okay.
But if they had a deviation to that,
I make a motion to approve.
to their signage plan,
Okay, we have a motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Second.
And I'm sorry, Ms. Johns, is that a motion to approve the first deviation or both?
Are we
We do one at a time?
I thought
I would
we-
probably best if
The
we
first
did them here.
deviation.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Do we have any further questions of the board? Of staff comments? The applicant constitutes the audience at this point.
Yes.
Okay, in that case, all in favor? Aye?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
The motion passes 4-1. Okay, staff, if you could just give us a very brief introduction of the second item.
Yeah, the second item is to increase, a deviation to increase the sign height from 36 inches to 48 inches.
Okay, do we have any other discussion before I call for a motion? All right, well, next step is a motion, folks.
I'll make a motion to increase the height from 36 inches to 48 for the building sign.
I second that.
Okay, it's been properly moved and seconded. Do we have any more discussion? Okay, everybody present, including the audience slash applicant and staff have indicated no more comments, so all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nay.
Motion carries 4-1.
Thank
All
you.
right, thank you,
Thank
sir.
y'all.
Thank you.
Just wait, I'm telling you.
Okay. That disposes of items 4 and 5, which brings us to item 6, the public workshop. Given that we have only 5 of us here,
It's up to you guys.
I think
I know-
if I were to make a few comments that are not intended to do really anything other than share a few observations that I have, does that constitute a workshop? Because they can wait, if it's best.
We can handle it however you guys want, and honestly, if you wanna have more workshops in the future, the BCC will authorize them, so,
Okay.
I mean,
How many do we-
have it-
It's
assuming
more
that
of
they
just
will.
like wanting to wrap it up, I think, than that. How many do we have left,
I think we have 2 left, yeah,
including tonight?
yes. Yep. It's up to you guys. I mean, I can't speak for the BCC, obviously, but I
No,
can't imagine
I
that they
hear you.
would
Yep.
have a problem with you holding
What's
more
the
workshops.
appetite of y'all? I have maybe, it'd take me probably 5 or 10 minutes to make a few comments on lighting. I just.
Well, and I'd like to point out the change from last time.
Okay, great. In that
Oh,
case,
yes.
take it away, Mr. Tim Brown.
Okay, on page 5, in the middle of the page there, I tried to take in your concern about having multiple bays. So, submittals shall include graphic depiction and specifications on the site plan and architectural elevation for the project, including where a regular tenant occupies more than one tenant bay or space. A regular tenant occupying more than one tenant bay or space is not permitted to have multiple identical building signs for those tenants' bays or spaces. So, I
Good.
tried to, that should prevent what happened at the crossing.
Yep, I think it's great.
Mm-hmm. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Sure. So that's the only change from our last meeting, because that was the big discussion, was when you had multiple tenant bays, how to handle that signage.
All right, David?
Okay, so on the subject of lighting, I think I had in the past through the staff emailed out an article that was a pretty good quick read type primer. So is it okay if I hand
Absolutely.
this out? And here's one for Karen if you pass.
Yeah, here you go.
Yep. Perfect, that worked out well. Okay. So you all have to read that now, but I will point out one of my initial comments has to do, I did a little bit more homework on the what's generally referred to as the temperature of light. And on page 3, toward the top of the page, there's a red line, I'm sorry, page 3 of the proposed modified ordinance we were just looking at. There is a, essentially, just to remind everybody, the structure that we're doing in for chapter 13 is at the bottom of page 2. There is a reference that lighting in the scenic corridor shall conform to chapter 5 of the code and shall also be subject to some additional standards. So we do have, the county does have some lighting regulation that does promote dark sky already, real basic stuff, in chapter 5. So there's paragraph B here about the temperature. The research that I did, and there is a chart in the little article I just handed out that has some colors and the temperature ranges, and this supports that. I think we should lower the temperature range allowed from 3,000, as we have drafted now, 3,000, no less than 3,000 and no greater than 5,000. I think it should be no less than 2,000 and no greater than 4,000. And I can tell you that most exterior lighting, the goal is above 3,000. most interior lighting or more residential type lighting will typically be less than 3,000. So I think tightening it up a little bit will get away from that blue spectrum light that's pretty obnoxious. Okay, so that was one item. And then the next real concept was I went through the model lighting ordinance that I think we talked about some time ago. And there are 5 concepts in it that I think we need to decide whether we want to bite off or not. And I'll just read through the 5 real quick. One is lighting zones. A second is lighting control requirements, and I'll explain all these in a second. Third is a street lighting ordinance. 4 is the concept of having a total lumens limit per site that's calculated. And then 5, you all may recall, we talked briefly about bug ratings, and bug stands for backlight, uplight, and glare. And essentially, it's a more sophisticated way to evaluate exterior lighting fixtures to avoid glare and light pollution, that type of stuff. So,
Sorry, David, I was gonna stop
Yeah.
you real quick. Karen, did you get all that, or are you
Oh, I'm
going to
sorry.
be able to get it all, those 5 things? Okay.
yeah, and I'll go through them one at a time.
Okay.
Yep, okay. So, the concept of lighting zones in the ordinance, essentially it describes 5 different, I think it's 5, it may actually be 6, I think they have a 0 in there. Yes, oh no, it's 5 total. So they're described as lighting zone 0. Lighting zone 0 is a location that would be appropriate for a national park or something like that, where you want absolutely no light, so that wildlife, folks exploring at night, and the night sky, of course, is preserved. I don't know, I'm not sure that our regulations affect the state parks anyway, so might be a relevant thing for us, but probably not as part of this chapter. Certainly not the scenic corridor. And then lighting zone 1 is recommended for very rural and very low density or low density residential areas. Conceivable that that's something we may want to consider for the county. I don't know that it would be applicable within the scenic corridor, so I won't worry about it for now. Lighting zone 2 is called moderate ambient lighting, and this one is described as areas of human activity where the vision of human residents and users is adapted to moderate light levels. Lighting may typically be used for safety and convenience, but it is not necessarily uniform or continuous. After curfew, lighting may be extinguished or reduced as activity levels decline. And that last sentence refers to a concept that's increasingly possible now because of LED lighting, where you could actually, at a certain hour of the night, have a requirement that lighting levels be diminished. And the examples would be the intensely lit parking lots for places like Publix or other shopping centers. And a typical standard is that the lighting levels be dropped by 30% in those locations. And the reference to a curfew is to a lighting curfew, and they vary according to the code from at close of that particular business to an hour or 2 hours after close. In some businesses, a bar or restaurant might have a 2-hour curfew while the business closes and patrons clear out and staff clears out or whatever. And my point in bringing these up is to just food for thought. If we want to, and the lighting zones continue on, that one that I just read is probably the one that would be an ideal goal. They do have higher lighting levels, but they're described as being typical of larger cities, things like that, which I would imagine we're trying to stay away from. But
Can I ask a
yeah,
question?
go ahead.
Are we concerned at all about minimum safety levels? How do you walk?
Oh, absolutely.
And see where your car is and get in the door, or security levels? How do you keep people from breaking in your building at night?
Yes.
And because what I heard you say
Yep.
does not take that into account. Or
Actually, it
I'm not hearing it take it into account.
Okay, they actually address this. The concept that increased lighting levels lead to reduced crime is not well supported by research. And I don't think that's hard to prove, because Walton County is a relatively dark place by any standard. And I would not say that Walton County has, by most standards, a crime problem.
For a lot of us.
I beg to differ.
Okay. And I'm not talking about individual situations. But again, this is why I asked these
Well,
questions.
but let
If
me
there's a
ask-
resistance to do this,
But let me
I
ask,
don't have a,
but let me
yeah.
ask this question.
yeah,
When you say a business has moderate lighting and it reduces by 30% at a certain time,
yes,
it's still lit.
absolutely,
It's just not lit up.
yes.
So I think, I don't think it takes a whole lot of light to deter crime if light does deter crime.
That's a good.
So that's kind of my thought on it. I mean, 30%, you still got 70% of that light intensity.
That's my understanding of the intent of the lighting
So-
control requirements, yes.
So I think that makes
Uh,
sense to me, but.
I do not agree with the comment that increased lighting leads to increased levels of security. And I probably should have maybe started this comment with, I would never propose to, for no reason or simply aesthetic reasons, that we consider more heavily regulating lighting. My concern, and I have said this at a prior meeting, is that I am fortunate to live in a neighborhood that is extremely dark, has no street lights whatsoever. To my knowledge, has had not any crime in the several years I've lived there whatsoever. But I have enjoyed, and my two sons and now my daughter both enjoy going out at night and looking at the stars and looking at the moon. And I think, as I've represented at a previous meeting, while that may sound like, oh, that's nice, go hug a tree now, David, I take it very,
Support it.
very seriously
I do too.
that there are people who leave parking lot lights on all night long for no reason at all. And the result is that if we allow many more of these parking lots to be built, my children will no longer be able to see the night sky. That's a problem to me. And I do not agree, and I have a technical background, and I would love for anyone who feels strongly about it to bring some research that shows that increased lighting levels deter crime, because I don't think you're going to find it.
I've been out of that business for 40-some years.
Yeah. I think it was
I knew that was a big deal back then.
a big deal pushed by lighting reps.
That's why they call them security lights.
You can call it, you can call it whatever you want, but it's not supported by research. What is supported by research is that the color of light makes a big difference in terms of deterring crime. One of the very well-established problems that exists even in heavily lit areas is that if the lighting is extremely, in most cases, because the sodium vapor is an extremely yellow light, that's a very poor color rendition at night. And there has been a lot of studies of the fact that criminals can operate in heavily lit areas that have very poor quality of light, because no one will ever be able to recognize what color shirt they're wearing. You frequently can't tell that there's a person standing there, even though they're in heavy lighting and stuff like that. So I do think that security is a big concern. I do think that we are much more sophisticated now about how things are lit, and I do think it's possible to preserve our dark sky that we're fortunate to have, and it's not going to last a whole lot longer. I think I mentioned in a previous meeting, I've already noticed in the 2 years I've lived on this one particular street that it is harder and harder. It has been, I want to say, in the last couple of months, I've seen the Milky Way once, whereas I, about 2 years ago, used to see it on almost every night.
Yeah.
And that's typically what will disappear first. It's hard to perceive the Milky Way. So I'm just saying, we got a chance for the next couple of years to make a difference. I don't think we're going to make the town, the area, become a crime-ridden area over this type of thing. So
Is the reduction of the poles, like they were 24 feet or whatever
Yes.
initially, so bringing that down to 14?
that actually, and this code recognizes that.
Where
The-
does it? Oh, you mean?
I'm sorry. Yeah,
code.
this model ordinance
Yeah,
recognizes that.
I think we should, too.
yeah.
No
And I'll
matter
just
what
give
else
you-
we do.
We just approved 16-foot.
Yes, and 16, and this is the key is that it's in relation to the distance from the, I'm sorry, I left one comment, Tim, off of, this is my suggestion. The end of that sentence I started reading from, light fixtures shall not exceed 14 feet in height. light fixtures exceeding 10 feet in height shall be set back from the property line, and we had a minimum of 10 feet. But after studying the code a little deeper, they should be set back a distance equal to their height. So if a 14-foot tall fixture would be set back 14 feet from the property. And the concept is essentially that, and this reference, I know I'm bouncing around a little bit, but the backlight in the bug rating is the light for, as an example, that parking lot we just looked at, the light fixtures are commonly placed around the perimeter of the lot. Backlight is the light that's shining away from the parking lot. And so if you use, under this, the model code, if you use a light that has a very short backlight, then it gets a, I believe it's a lower bug rating, meaning that when you start calculating the total lumens per site, as I understand the way it works, you could actually have more lights, more light fixtures, because you control the light better.
Right.
But if you use a fixture that happens to throw a lot of light around, then that has a higher requirement. So
Cutoff fixtures similar to cutoff.
well, the bug rating is essentially taking the cutoff concept and becoming more sophisticated about it. Full cutoff is simply just saying it's 90 degrees, no light is shown up into the sky, but it makes no distinction between whether the light goes forward, backward, sideways, wherever. The bug rating actually sort of divides the hemisphere up a little more. If you had a fixture that was in the center of a parking lot where it was all parking lot around it, then that wouldn't be subject to that requirement. But when you get to the edge of the property, the requirement for the fixture increases to control the light. So same concept, but just a little more sophisticated.
And this is enlightening me because I didn't quite have that understanding of the true definition of full cutoff. So back when Publix went in on the north side of 98, this was a huge issue. And I remember the Scenic Corridor Foundation, me personally, were fighting it after it went in, because driving by you realized how bright all that light was and all the spillover into 98.
Yep.
So they did agree after the fact to install some shields on the light fixtures along 98, which helped a tiny bit.
Yeah.
But it was still a big issue. So is there no requirement right now in our code for shielding? So that's something to consider at a
Yep.
minimum. I like the whole hog thing. I'm just trying to pick out some things that maybe we can.
And part of that is the height too. If the height were down,
Yes.
they wouldn't,
Yes.
which is what
And that's
David
what-
just alluded to.
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what, as I dug into
That's
this
another
code,
thing.
that's what I've understood. And that's what it says in the preamble. It says this is the same concepts, but they're developed so that the regulation controls what it needs to control and doesn't control what it doesn't need to control.
But it's like, in our building, what I've noticed at night is that I don't have any lights in my parking lot. My cutoff lights off my building are at a height and spaced so that photometrically I've got adequate light out to my property boundary, but I'm not messing with my neighbor. But you can walk to your car at the perimeter of the site and feel good. I mean, feel comfortable. You've got plenty of light. It's not in your face anywhere else, and that works nicely. And I want to think that we used to, even 2 years ago, want to see more light on parking lots. We were looking for larger numbers close.
More light fixtures, you mean?
Maybe that's what I'm trying to say, but it
Yeah.
was,
Yeah.
you know, and I'm just
Lower-
thinking our
lower
fixtures
and
have
closer.
got, we've got access to some really nice stuff out there now
Right.
with
Yeah.
LED.
Well,
One comment, I'm fixing to go to Captiva for a week before Christmas, and one of the things they have in all of their marketing stuff there is the night sky. Sanibel and Captiva, and any of y'all that have ever been there, that's such a highly regulated island.
Right.
There's not a street on there that goes more than 35 miles an hour. They got 25 miles of paths, and, you know, all kind of preserved, but it's dark.
yeah. There's some economic value to that. believe
There
it or
is, I
not.
mean, they're taking
I mean,
it from a
yeah.
marketing standpoint
Yeah.
and using it,
Well,
so.
if I can just bring up two quick things, since we're talking about parking lots for, or especially larger parking lots, you have it small enough that you can,
Yeah,
that's great. If you compare, and I know it's my employer, just bear with me a minute. compare the Publix at Grand Boulevard to the one in Santa Rosa Beach.
Right.
That Publix is, if not the, maybe the second top grossing Publix in the nation. So there's no problem with view from the highway and all of that.
Right.
And it is also safe. We don't have a safety issue there. The intensity of light there is much, much lower between those two.
Part of
So-
that's vegetation though too,
Some of
because
it,
it's knocked down, the trees knock it down.
some of it, yeah. But it's also the foot candles are lower. They have really, really high foot candles on that lot, in my opinion. And so I just want to make that point that it can be done and you can still achieve all the other goals. And the second point is that I read a study, they did a sleep study on the impact of light. And they had people in a completely dark room and literally they had all the monitors on them, everything hooked up. Literally, they could do a pinpoint of light on the back of a person's knee while they slept, and they did not get as deep and good a sleep. So it is a real health issue. I know it's kind of, and seeing the night skies, I'm not saying it's not important. I'm
Yeah.
saying it's not the only benefit.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
And I will tell you that when I lived in Inlet Beach, and I was close to 98, we didn't have street lights in my neighborhood, which I loved on that side of my house, but on the back side of my house, I had all this commercial light pouring in. I will tell you, I went to, it was the most frustrating situation to try to black out my bedroom. If you've ever tried to really accomplish that, it is hard. So that shows, how much light there is out there. And Inland Beach is not even really that heavily developed yet. And back then, this was a couple of years ago. I don't even live there anymore. It really wasn't then. So there are some health impacts, and they're studying more and more. And you've probably heard the news stories and articles about how people are more likely to commit crimes when they're not well slept. They of course get sick. There are higher accident rates. They're saying that driving sleepy is more dangerous than driving drunk. So I think there are a lot of reasons to really take this seriously and think about it.
And I didn't mean to snap at you with the comment that there was in the past a belief that more lighting levels discourage crime. I think the challenge with a lot of this is that some of the information that's put out there is put out there.
Self-serving.
It's self-serving. Is probably a quick way to say it.
Yeah.
But I listened to and I can't remember if I've made reference to this before. I started gathering. It's one of those things that as soon as you become sensitive to it and you start looking around, it seems like it's everywhere. But I heard something on whatever the version of NPR is now, with a scientist that works at one of the national parks that has the designation of being one of the darkest places on Earth, and it's out west somewhere. And he actually was absolutely convinced that the ways in which society is changing and people are tending, and I'll just say it, y'all have your opinion about it if you want, that people are seeming to become more self-centered, society is sort of losing its grasp of mankind's place in the whatever world you think we live in, the universe, whatever it is. And he had a real simple observation. If you live in a place where you can't see the night sky, you have no idea how small man is. And so when I get very excited and passionate about the fact that my children grow up seeing the night sky, it's a big deal to me because it shapes the way they perceive themselves and the way they perceive the outside world. I don't think it's any coincidence that most people that live in cities see nothing but a yellow haze above them, and they have no grasp that there is life beyond the end of their little world. So I think it's a big deal. I think it's a reason that a lot of us enjoy living here is that there's a sense of a larger thing going on beyond us. And I don't mean to, again, sound all tree-huggy and crazy, but I think it's something that it will be a real pity if our night sky goes the way that Destin's went, and the way that Pensacola's is gone, and Tallahassee's is gone, I think we still have the ability to do something about it. I do think that we can do something about it in a way with these new tools that doesn't create unsafe conditions, because I certainly don't want to encourage anyone to move here or who lives here to go start committing very serious crimes that can damage people's lives, just as much as I'm talking about my children's lives. So, and I think we ought to struggle through this, and that's kind of my intent of rattling off some of these things. I got just two more quick observations. And again, these are all areas that, if any of this sounds like it's worth doing, I'll keep digging and try to develop some language with Tim. Tim and I unfortunately weren't able to meet between the two meetings, and but we'll meet and we can start digging into some of this stuff. I mentioned the concept of total lumens per site, and that ties back into the concept of lighting zones. And the quick version of this is that a lighting zone comes with a number of lumens allowed per square foot of the way they describe it as hardscape, which would be parking lots and walkways and that type of stuff. And so in the case of a lighting zone 2, you're allowed 2.5 lumens per square foot. You then calculate up in this scenario they use, they just, to make the numbers easy, they said, okay, so you have 100,000 square feet times 2.5 lumens per square foot means you have a total lumens allowed of 250,000 lumens. You then start breaking down, in this scenario they had a project that had 8 70-watt metal halide fixtures. They had a total lumens each of 3,920, and they just start doing the math. And so basically you get a lighting budget, and you can place your fixtures where you want. And so I think what that would do for a lighting designer, or the individual responsible for designing lighting on a site, they would have a budget, and they can put those lights where they think they need to be safe, to create the aesthetic character they're trying to create or whatever. But they can't just start banging down light fixtures, just, oh, I'll put one here, I'll put one there, I'll put one here. I noticed that the one we approved, the project we just approved, had 3 lights across the front that were spaced much closer together on the street frontage than the lights in the back. And I kind of wondered, well, why didn't they get rid of one of those fixtures? You know, maybe if they had a lighting budget, they might have gotten rid of one of those fixtures, and it wouldn't have changed anything. It would have been just as safe. It would have been aesthetically probably a little better looking. It wouldn't have had a bright spot at the front entrance. So I think this would just give us a tool where people can you still can use lights. This doesn't outlaw lights, but they wouldn't just be able to spread them like peanut butter across the site, where it's really not serving any purpose other than just that's where they have to throw a light fixture.
Well, watercolor, they have the nice lights.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
serve their purpose, and they're pretty, and they don't
Yeah.
cause a problem with the.
Yep. And then the street lighting ordinance is the last one I really didn't talk a whole lot about. They distinguish, they recognize that, street lights are a major contributor to light pollution. You can't really regulate street lights because you can't necessarily say, okay, at 10 o'clock all the street lights turn off. It's just a different animal. And so I haven't dug real deep into that yet, other than this concept that there would be, if we wanted to, we could have a separate code that regulated street lights. The reason that they're very careful to point that out is, particularly since we have a lot of private streets in this area, if we're not careful, if we're not going to have a street light ordinance, there are a few things that you have to add into the rest of the ordinance to say that you can't get around this ordinance by simply placing your bright lights in the right of way and shining them back onto the property. And so they recommend that you kind of get that straight how you want to move. I think we do well to have a streetlight ordinance, because there are places that even where I'm building a house now, it's unfortunate. I'm going to try to have a conversation with my neighbors to ask that we all consider going to Gulf Power and ask them to take a light down. And I'm going to volunteer to put up a little street light in my front yard and see if I can convince Gulf Power to hook up to it or whatever. But it's unfortunate because this light, I'm sure it was a case if there was no light on the end of the street, someone probably perfectly valid reason said, I'd like to have a light. So Gulf Power mounted this great big sodium vapor thing. It's probably 35 feet in the air.
Somebody's paying for that.
They
One
might
of your
be.
neighbors may be paying for
They
it
may be,
every month.
but
That's
it lights all the
good.
way to my backyard. It's great. My house finally created a shadow, so I've got a little bit of a dark corner in my backyard. But just the particular, it's at the top of a hill, at the top of a very tall post.
Just call Gulf Power and tell them your address.
Yeah. Or I just
Guarantee you that's
give
your
give my
neighbor.
kid a BB gun for anyway, the point being is that, I'd love to see us think a little more thoughtfully about where we place street lights. And again, it was a perfectly well-intended light, I'm sure.
Right.
Nobody was trying to ruin my day. But the unfortunate reality is it could be done better. So anyway, I promised I'd try to keep it to 5 or 10 minutes, and I went way beyond that. So anyway, if any of that or generally sounds good, Tim, we'll get together and try to figure out a way to.
Well, let me
draft some
ask you
stuff.
this, since our next DRB meeting is right after the holidays, do you guys think it would be a good idea maybe to hold the next workshop in February, and that would give
Yeah.
you and Tim a little bit more time to sit down?
Yeah.
very much
Yeah,
so.
because,
It's a
you
great
know, we're
idea.
gonna be closed some
Yeah.
over the holidays, so I think that's a good idea.
Yep.
I'd love to see something on all of that, and then we can decide if we have issues with any of it, but
Yeah.
let's look at it all and see. And another thing, I think this is already disallowed in the code, but you brought it up once before, David, and I've seen it in a couple of places. These folks putting really bright lights on the front of their building that shine out toward 98. It is just crazy.
Yeah.
There's one at the Mexican place.
Oh, they got 4 or 5 of them now.
What? Yeah, they did. They put
Yes,
more out.
Los Rancheros.
Los
yeah.
Rancheros. They've got lights on the front of that building that just shine right out to 98. You look over there and it's like, wow. And I've seen more and more of it in Miramar Beach too, with more development down there. But that's another thing. Is that disallowed in the code? Can they just put a spotlight on the front of their building and shine it out to 98? I would think.
I don't think so, because it specifically says in the scenic corridor, it's gotta be either a full cutoff or a semi-cutoff fixture. That's not limited just to parking lots. It says all lighting in the scenic corridor, it's either full cutoff or it's semi-cutoff fixtures.
And one big challenge with regulating lighting is that, you know, just it's perfectly understandable that the code enforcement staff work during daylight hours for the most part. So lighting is a tough thing to deal with.
Yeah, and you have to, depending on how you're measuring it, you need more than one tool. Measuring foot candles is different than measuring lumens.
Yeah. And that is another, this model code recognizes that a lot of the calculation is done based on the fixture, an analysis of the fixture, not necessarily photometrics. In other words, you come up with that budget, you look at the fixture and you say, here's your budget for how many lumens you can have. You don't have to rely on the engineer playing around with a photometric plan. You know, they can, that's the lighting they get. They can use it all or not. And so, because from the perspective of dark sky, this is not so much, doesn't speak to the issue of, if, you know, they put a light fixture in the wrong spot and it can be harmful to the neighboring properties. But from the perspective of dark sky, it really doesn't matter where on the site the lights are located. It's the same net amount of light flying up in the sky. So,
Yeah.
so different parts of the code kind of cover different pieces of it. All right, that's it for me.
Well, I got a good example. When I was in St. Johns County, they built a gas station in Ponte Vedra, and let me tell you, I think you can see this thing from space. It is seriously
Stations are
bright.
the worst.
We stopped there one night, me and one of the assistant county attorneys, and I was squinting. Seriously, it was so bright in there. It's like, holy crap, no wonder we're getting so many complaints. But they didn't have any lighting regulation. I mean, we couldn't tell them, you know, it's too bright, but I mean, that's the brightest gas station I've ever been to.
Wow.
Well, last time I was in space, I could see 2 things, that thing and the Thrills sign.
Are you sure you couldn't see Publix?
You see that doodle on top of the wheel sign?
That's great.
Okay, on that note, do we have any more business to come before the design review board?
Should we?
Really quick, I want to introduce everybody to Heather Christman. She's our new assistant county attorney.
Hey,
Welcome. Yeah. You guys will get to know Heather in January and February while I'm out. So.
Okay.
Yeah. But she's
Boy,
got.
you gonna be good.
I know. I don't know.
She won't be struggling to reach that microphone.
No, that's
She's just going to take some time off,
yeah.
get recharged.
Nice vacation, right?
Right.
Nice relaxing vacation.
Talking about like a sleeper.
But Heather works in Central Florida with a lot of municipalities down there, so she'll be a great resource for us.
Welcome. Okay, on that note, I think I heard a
Make a
suggestion, motion to adjourn. I guess we
Second.
and then everybody, I'm sure, will be in favor. We stand adjourned.
We'll do the workshop.
Yeah, and I'd rather talk about this stuff after a short meeting than a long one. Oh my
Absolutely.
God.
Absolutely.
Start running out of concentration power.